Yes.
Okay, so good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
And welcome to Passover in the Talmud, part 3. That's a wrap. Topic, that's a wrap. And we sure have delicious wraps tonight. We are celebrating, today we're celebrating one of our regular class goers, Shmuel David, Hakayin Marmor. His 40th birthday was today, and this is his birthday party. So you could, as you're watching, if you're watching online, smell the aroma of the delicious food coming from the tables over here. You cannot see it, but it sure is good. So God bless you, Shmuel David. God bless you for always supporting the class, always being ready to support, to even contribute, even if it's just simply for the sake of contributing. And may God bless you in everything that you do. L'chaim. So, here we go. The first class was talking about instilling holiday joy. Last week we spoke about the significance of the 4 cups of wine. Tonight's class is going to be talking about the kairech, the sandwich, the Passover signature sandwich. This is part 3. We have one more, before we begin, we have one more Passover in the Talmud class. That's going to take place next week. It's the final one before Pesach. It is not going to be on Thursday, for the simple reason that Thursday night is the night that we check for chametz, b'dikas chametz, and one is not even allowed to learn Torah before they check for chametz. So everything, including Talmud class, gets pushed away for the sake of checking chametz. That's the halacha, that's the law. So we cannot have a Torah class on Thursday night, but we will have it on Monday night. And Monday night itself is a very auspicious time. Monday night is Yud Aleph Nisan, the 11th of Nisan, which is the Rebbe's birthday. And I checked with the rabbi. Usually Yud Aleph Nisan, the 11th of Nisan, marking Rebbe's birthday. Each year we do it the day of into that evening. So I checked with the rabbi, and it's fine that we'll have a Talmud class on Monday. And if we should have a celebration of Rebbe's birthday, that will be Tuesday night. It's going to be Tuesday night, and that together with the Torah class, Rabbi Farkas, it will all be organized. He says no. Okay.
No Torah class.
No Torah class. Instead, for Bregan. Okay. So that's going to be Monday night. So before we get into tonight's class, letting you know there is a part 4. It's Monday night, same time, but on Monday instead of Thursday, and that will be the final class talking about provoking proverbial questions. Say that 10 times backwards. Provoking proverbial questions. And that's going to be talking about the Seder, etc., etc. Okay, so the basis and the origin of tonight's class, which is talking about the kairech sandwich, originates from the Talmud, page 115, side A, Daf Kuf Tes Vav Amud Aleph. And I am endeavoring to divide this class into 2 main parts. One, to give you a understanding, an appreciation that even something as simple as a sandwich has so much richness and depth to it. And it's not just about eating a sandwich. Because after all, as Jews, that's what we do. We take even the most simple things and we make them ridiculously complicating and complex is actually the better word, complex. And so too when it comes to eating a sandwich. There's a lot of, I'm not going to say complexity. There is complexity, but it's coming from richness. There's wealth and depth to it. So we're going to appreciate that. That's what we're endeavoring to do tonight, to give an appreciation for it. And the second part is going to be a walkaway with an appreciation of what is behind the reasoning for the sandwich, what it represents, how we can apply the sandwich metaphorically to our day-to-day lives, and what it means to us, what lessons we can take from it. Obviously, everything that we do at the Passover Seder, it explains many, many places. The idea, the concept of a Passover Seder, it's all literal. We are saying things, we are fulfilling mitzvot, we're fulfilling commandments, we're eating, we're partaking in certain activities, but everything has significance, everything has meaning, and everything has lessons. So we're going to learn what lesson we can learn from eating a sandwich. So those are the 2 parts of tonight's class I'm going to endeavor in doing. So the first part is as follows. Says the Haggadah. I forgot to get the Haggadah here before I started. Says the Haggadah that when it comes to the order of kairech, eating of the sandwich, it says as follows. We take matzah, we take maror, that's the bitter herbs, and then we say the following paragraph. I'm going to try to say it as verbatim as I can. Kain asa Hillel. This is what Hillel did. Bisman shebeis hamikdash hayikayim, at the time that the holy temple, the Beis Hamikdash, once stood. Hayakayrech matzah umaru va'oichlum biyachad. He would sandwich the matzah and the maror, and he would eat them together. I'm sorry. Hayakayrech pesach matzah umaru va'oichlum biyachad. Thank you for the correction. He would sandwich the Pesach, the Paschal lamb, the Karban Pesach, together with the matzah and the maror, and he would eat them together. L'kayin k'mashin emar, that's one version. Another version, k'mashin emar, as it is written, al matzos u'marorim yechluhu, says in Parshas Bay, in the Torah portion of Bay, where it talks about the halachas and the mitzvahs of offering the Paschal lamb, that one should eat it with matzah and maror. Al matzos u'marorim yechluhu, you should eat them with matzah and maror. So the Gemara is going to talk about, primarily, is going to endeavor as to what are the ramifications of sandwiching matzah and maror and the Paschal lamb, and how is it applicable today that we do not have the Holy Temple and we cannot offer the Paschal lamb? So on this, if you have the Hebrew text of the Gemara, it is going to be on the line that starts Ravina, and that's about 7 lines in or 8 lines in. It's actually the word before that, the last word of the line Omar. And in your English handout, it is going to be towards the bottom on the left-hand side of where it says 115A1. Or, well, shall I say, 115A1. So, I'm going to be right over there. And it says as follows. Omar Ravina. Everyone has it? No. Omar Ravina. Says Ravina as follows. Amali Rav Mishrashia, Breid Rav Nosson. Ravina says as follows. Rav Mishrashia, the son of Rav Nosson, said to me, that Hachi Amar Hillel Mishmei de Gemara. So says Hillel in the name of the Gemara. Now it's actually not very common that in the text of the Talmud Gemara itself, you will hear that they heard in the name of the Gemara. So what does this mean? The commentaries explain, and it's actually a yesod, what we call it's a principle, a foundation throughout Talmud, that very often whenever we hear the word Gemara or Gemirila, that we learn it, Gemara, what is that referring to? That's referring to tradition. There's a tradition. We know, as we have mentioned here a few times, the Torah itself is divided into 2 main parts. We have what's called the written Torah, and we have what's called the oral Torah. The written Torah, as we know it, is the Torah scroll. We pull it out, the 5 books of Moses. We open that up. That's what we call the written Torah, including also, by the way, the Torah, Nevi'im, and Kesuvim, the Tanakh, which is incorporating the prophets and writings, etc. It's all somewhat. That's basically included as the written Torah. The oral Torah was given and taught to Moshe Rabbeinu and Moses while he was up there on the top of Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights. That's what he was involved in. This gives a lot of insights, a lot of explanations to the mitzvah, to the Torah, and it's just as much of a Torah as the written Torah. They both have equal holiness and equal importance. The difference is the Torah that was taught to Moshe was not written down. It was orally transmitted and taught from generation to generation, and it was never written down. And if it was written down, it was written down by a student and hidden on a little piece of paper, a little piece of parchment, and was hidden away. And sometimes they found those little scrolls that were hidden away. They call them gnizot, they call them hidden books. But for the most part, it was not written down. It was only written down by a student to commit to his own memory. You write down notes, it makes it easier to remember, but it was never shared. Until the time of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, where he wrote down the oral Torah, basically looking at the generation, the time, the culture at that time, and concluded that if he's not going to write down the Torah, the oral Torah as it is then, is going to be forgotten. Eis lasas Hashem hefer Torasecha, the time to do for God. Sometimes you go against the Torah. They go against the Torah's wishes. And that's what we have the Mishnah. The Mishnah is basically the documentation of the oral Torah. Where am I getting at? So when we see in the Gemara, when we see the text in the Gemara, in the Talmud, where it says Mishmei de Gemara, in the name of the Gemara, what are we talking about? We're talking about in the name of a down generation by generation tradition going all the way back as far as we go. So, there's this Hillel that said in the name of the Gemara, in the name of a tradition that he had heard, and is giving over the tradition that he has heard. What is this tradition? A person should not sandwich together matzah and maror and eat it. Now again, who said this? Hillel. Hillel said in the name of tradition, a person should not eat matzah and maror together in a sandwich. Why? Mishum, because. Desviralan, because he's of the opinion, because we are of the opinion, says Hillel, that matzah bizman hazeh da'iraisa, matzah in today's time, meaning today's time when after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, after the destruction of the Holy Temple, da'iraisa remains a biblical mitzvah, a commandment directly from the Torah. Umara dirabanan, and nowadays the eating, a consumption of maror is rabbinical. It is not biblical. It's only a rabbinical decree, a rabbinical given mitzvah. Va'asi maror dirabanan umavatale lamatzah da'iraisa. We are afraid that the power of the rabbinical, which is inferior to biblical, the rabbinical mitzvah of eating maror we are afraid that is going to outweigh the biblical mitzvah of eating matzah, to the point that's muvatale, it's going to nullify, outweigh to the point that's going to nullify it. So because we are worried about that, we do not wrap and eat this sandwich nowadays. So, that is the statement. Says Hillel, in the name of tradition, we do not eat matzah and maror wrapped together nowadays, because matzah is a biblical mitzvah, maror is a rabbinical mitzvah, and we are afraid that the maror is going to outweigh and nullify the matzah, which is a biblical mitzvah. That the rabbinical mitzvah is going to outweigh and nullify the biblical mitzvah. The rabbanan mitzvah is going to outweigh the dairaisa. The mitzvah coming from the Torah would be nullified in the way of maror, which is only a rabbinical decree. So there's a lot of things to try to understand over here. First of all, did we not just quote the Haggadah that said that Hillel, he was the one that ate the sandwich? And now Hillel is telling us that we do not eat the sandwich. What's going on over here? So a simple explanation is that Hillel in the Haggadah is eating the Karban Pesach together with the matzah and maror. And over here, he only mentions the matzah and maror and not the Karban Pesach. But why would Hillel quote that? Why would Hillel even say that? So, we need some understanding here. So the Mefarshim, the commentaries come along and explain. Hillel and Hillel are two different people. Will the real Hillel stand up? Hillel over here in the Talmud that we just quoted is not the same Hillel mentioned in the Haggadah. And there are proofs for that. You see, Hillel, as mentioned in the Haggadah, was the famous Hillel known as Hillel HaZaken, Hillel the elder. He's mentioned in Pirkei Avot. He's mentioned ethics of our fathers. He's given us teachings over there. Hillel HaZaken lived in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, in the Second Temple, while it still stood. That's what we said in the Haggadah. Bizman sheBeis HaMikdash hayikayim, the time that the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, stood. The Hillel over here is a descendant. He was a different Hillel. He was often called Hillel HaKatan, Hillel the small one. The small one. Some people claim that Hillel HaKatan, as mentioned here in the Gemara, is a direct descendant of Hillel HaZaken, mentioned in the Haggadah. What is a proof that this is a different Hillel? Because he's coming along and telling us, nowadays that we don't have the Beis HaMikdash, so clearly he's not living in that era. And so he's coming along and giving us that insight. So therefore, he is able to come and seemingly, at face value, contradict the teaching of the other Hillel. Hillel, as mentioned in the Haggadah, did wrap together Pesach, Matzah, and Maror together. This Hillel HaKatan is saying that we do not do that. So the Mefarshim explain it's very simple. They're not contradicting each other. They are two different Hillels. There's the Hillel HaKatan, mentioned here in the Talmud, who, by the way, was no small person himself. He actually was responsible. This Hillel HaKatan, if that's who he truly is actually responsible for putting together the Jewish calendar as we have it today. That came from this Hillel HaKatan. The Yavitz explains that this Hillel HaKatan, it could be that it is him. If it is him, then he's the one credited for that. But he's able to give a different opinion than Hillel HaZaki, because it's two different Hillels. They lived hundreds of years apart. Hundreds, literally. This Hillel HaKatan lived about 7 or 8 generations after the Beis HaMikdash, the second temple, was destroyed. Hillel HaZaken lived within 100 years before the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. So he clearly was partaking of the Paschal Lamb. Hillel HaKatan, who lived many generations later, was not. So that explains that. There's another thing that we need to verify. What is this concept that matzah is d'oraisa and maror is d'rabbanan? What is this concept that matzah is biblical and maror is rabbinical? So a few pages later, I believe it's Kuf Chaf, a few pages later, in Psachim, in the same tractate Talmud, it gives us the explanation. You see, we have two different verses. We have two different psukim. In Parshas Bay, by the way, in the same Torah portion. One says, Ba'erev teichel matzos. In the evening you shall eat matzah. So we have a biblical mitzvah. In the evening we should eat matzah. Period. Then there's a second mitzvah, a second verse, a second pasuk that tells us, Al matzos u'merorim yechluhu. In regards to partaking of the Paschal Lamb, one must eat it together with matzah and maror. The Talmud derives from these two verses that matzah, therefore, remains a biblical mitzvah even after the Holy Temple was destroyed, being that the matzah, the biblical mitzvah of eating matzah, is a mitzvah unto itself, irregardless of what else we are doing that night. We need to eat matzah. As opposed to maror, the only time we have a mention in the Torah of eating maror is when we eat it together with the Paschal Lamb. That when you eat the Paschal Lamb, the Karban Pesach, al matzah sumeroim yachlu, you're supposed to eat the Paschal Lamb together with matzah and maror. Meaning that if you do not have the Paschal Lamb, concludes the Talmud a few pages later, if you do not have the Paschal Lamb, you are not obligated to eat the maror or the matzah, at least together with the Karban Pesach, the Paschal Lamb. Therefore, says the Talmud, matzah nowadays is still a biblical mitzvah. Maror nowadays is not a biblical mitzvah. It is only a biblical mitzvah when we eat it together with the Karban Pesach, with the Paschal Lamb. Nowadays we do not have the Paschal Lamb. We do not have a Beis HaMikdash in order to offer the Paschal Lamb. Therefore, we do not have a biblical mitzvah of eating maror, because the Torah explicitly said maror must be eaten together with the Karban Pesach. Meaning, if you do not have the Karban Pesach, you are not obligated to eat the maror together with it. It's one package deal. So that's the second point I wish to bring out to Lina. So far understood? So you all with me? Okay, so we have these two concepts, giving an explanation of what's going on. So it says Hillel, not the same Hillel as Hillel HaZaken of the Haggadah. Says Hillel, we have a problem eating matzah and maror together in a sandwich nowadays. Why? Because matzah is a biblical mitzvah. Now we understand what that means. Maror is a rabbinical decree. It is not a biblical mitzvah nowadays. Based on the Talmud, we now understand that. Now we have a problem. What is our problem? When you try eating them together, one is superior to the other. The matzah is more superior to the maror, being that the matzah is a mitzvah from the Torah and the maror is not nowadays. The problem is the marar might come along and be mevatel, nullify the mitzvah of matzah. The marar will come and outweigh and nullify the matzah. We have to understand what that means. So to give a little bit of a background, I want to introduce to all of you a very fundamental concept when it comes to eating kosher, and that's the concept of bittul. What is bittul? The fundamental principle of bittul, nullification, is as follows. Generally, if you have, there are two dimensions in understanding bittul, nullification. And in order to understand that, let's give a principal example of what bittul, nullification, when it comes to eating kosher, is as follows. You have, let's say, a stew of meat. And you have, I'm just giving a very basic principle, a basic example. And you have some, let's say, milk. A drop of milk fell into that pot of meat stew. Says the Torah, you cannot cook, you cannot eat, you cannot benefit. 3 times we have lois savashal gedipa chalevimai. You're not allowed to cook, eat, or benefit from meat and milk together. You're not allowed to. So what happens if milk falls into a meat stew? So you're mixing meat and milk together. That food is not kosher. The food is not kosher. It's meat and milk together. What's the solution? By the way, the solution over here is not to do it at first, what we call lechatchila. It's not the proper course of action to do it. The solution, if this happened already, is to assess the situation. To assess the situation, basically, is bittul, meaning you assess it and you see how much fell in. And if the amount of meat stew is 60 times the amount of the milk that fell into it, meaning 1 part milk, 60 more times meat, we have a concept called bittul b'shishin, which means the 60 nullifies the 1. 60 nullifies 1. Now there are 2 understandings of what that means. 2 different understandings. The first principle and way of understanding that is that when the 60 nullifies the 1 ceases to exist. It ceases to exist. It's as if it's no longer there. That's one way of understanding this. But another deeper way of understanding bittul, coming and being mevatel, nullifying, is that not that it ceases to exist, but now it is no longer identifiable as an entity independently, as an independent entity. It's no longer independent of itself, it is now part of the whole. So not that it ceases to exist, but now it became part of a whole. So, simple example of that, doesn't necessarily have to be with food. A basic understanding of something that instead doesn't mean that it ceases to exist, but that it becomes a part of a bigger whole. We had, in the forming of the state of Israel, there were many different underground organizations and militias, if you may call it. You had the Palmach, you had the Haganah, you had all these different little pockets. The Palmach actually was an elite brigade of the Haganah, but they basically were little militia groups, each one fighting for independence and fighting against the British mandate, right? That's a little bit of history. What happened, and by the way, I mentioned the Palmach. The Palmach was a very prestigious brigade. There were prime ministers that came out of it. Yitzhak Rabin, I believe. Yitzhak Rabin, Menachem Begin, I believe, was a member of Palmach. I mean, important people came from that brigade. The Palmach no longer exists. Why? Because you had the Palmach, you had the Haganah, you had all the others, you had Lachi, there was a few other groups that eventually formed together, a coalition, if you will, and they all merged together and became Tzva Haganah Yisrael, the IDF. They became an army. They formed an army together, formed out of all the little militias, formed together a proper army. Does that mean that the Palmach ceased to exist? It didn't cease to exist. But now it no longer identifies itself as a separate entity. Now it is part of the whole. Now it's a part of one whole. There's a metaphorical anecdote. Every time I think of anecdote, I think of a certain person. There's a metaphorical anecdote where you have a small wave and a big wave. The small wave turns to the big wave and says, "Big brother, once we crash into the seashore, we're done. It's over." And the bigger wave turns to the smaller wave and says, "No, you foolish little brother. Once we crash on the seashore, we pull back and we become part of the ocean." So it's a metaphor given on this concept. There's a beautiful story I'm going to add on this. Back in the shtetl, back in the old village, there was a wedding. If you want to imagine what this means, go watch Fiddler on the Roof. And they're pretty accurate on what it means a shtetl wedding. A shtetl wedding. A wedding happened in the village and everyone gathered together. So what do? So they slaughtered a goat and they prepared the meat. They prepared a big cholent soup, a stew, and they were going to serve it by the wedding. What happened? One day, as the wedding is drawing near, someone passed by the event where they were cooking this meat stew and was drinking a glass of milk. And someone bumped into him, one person bumped into the next, it became a domino effect. Basically, the milk ended up splashing into the stew. The village people who were gathered around tried to assess the situation. They knew a little bit of Torah law. They knew this concept of 60 nullifying the 1. And they looked at the situation, and with the little knowledge they had, they felt they had a big problem. They did not feel that there was 1 part to 60. They did not feel that it was 60 nullifying 1. They didn't feel it was enough. So they had the impulse to declare, saying that the stew, done, not kosher, no wedding, no food. The catering is cancelled because the stew is not kosher. In the end, they decided they're going to ask the rabbi anyways. The rabbi, the village rabbi, the Rav. So they go to the Rav. I have an important question for the Rav. What's the question? And they give him the question. What does the rabbi do? He tells them, "Give me 2 hours." Comes 2 hours later, they go back to the rabbi, the Rav. The Rav says, "I paskin, I give my verdict, the stew is kosher. It's kosher." Oh, village people looking at the rabbi. "Kosher? Are you sure, Rabbi? Are you sure?" Rabbi says it's kosher. Not only is it kosher, I'm going to the wedding and I'll eat it. I will go to the wedding, I will sit there and I will eat that stew. That's how much I believe it's kosher. Wow, okay. Sure enough, comes the wedding, the chuppah happens, husband and wife, they get married, there's a big celebration. There are people dancing, balancing bottles of wine on their heads, doing a good Kazatska dance and a hop Kazak and a Kazakh dance. It's all good. Sure enough, the meal comes, the rabbi sits down and he's eating the stew. Now listen, if the rabbi is eating the stew, he's the rabbi. We can rely on him. What happened? No one could figure out why. The rabbi says it's fine. We trust the rabbi. A long time later, the secret behind the rabbi's verdict finally came out, but it was a long time later. What happened? The rabbi said, "Give me 2 hours." What happened during those 2 hours? Immediately after he shut the door, he summoned the village milkman. He summoned him over. He tells him, "Yankala, tell me, how much water did you put in the milk?" "Rabbi, you don't trust me? You're accusing me of mixing water in the milk? Rabbi, how could you accuse me of such a thing?" Shh, Yankala. Don't worry, I'm not here to publicize anything. Just tell me. No one needs to know. Just let me know. How much water did you put in the milk? I did not put any water in the milk. No. After a few minutes, coaxing. Finally, he breaks down crying. He says, Rabbi, please, I beg you, don't think of me in anything. I don't mean anything bad. I'm trying to feed my family, to feed my kids. The cow is driving me off the wall, not producing enough milk that I wanted. I have to make a little bit of parnasa. The Rabbi says, it's okay, don't worry about it. Just let me know how much water was it. I just want to know. I'm not going to tell anybody. I just want to know how much water. Turns out, it was a lot of water. A lot of water mixed into that milk. And so the rabbi, thank you, have a nice day. And the rabbi made that calculation. If it was pure milk, you got a problem. But since the milk was mixed with water, so the rabbi made the calculation, the milk together with the added water to that, added the stew of meat, ended up being batal b'shishim. That was declared nullified in 60. So a nice story about that. Now, think about it this way. You have 60 pints of milk, of meat stew, and you got 1 pint of milk on top of that fell into the 60 pints. So right now, the first way of understanding is that it ceases to exist. It ceases to exist, really? Beforehand, you had 60 pints. Now you got 61. That's a full extra serving. What do you mean the milk disappeared? Ceases to exist. It's there. You got a whole extra pint in the pot. But if you understand it from this standpoint, it's not that it becomes nullified. It's that the nullification means it still exists, but now it's not independently identified. It's not identified on its own. It is now part of a greater whole. With that being said, we can now better appreciate what is this query of of Hillel. What is the query of Hillel? Is as follows. You come to have a problem of batul, you have a problem of eating matzah and maror. Before we get to this, this is the commonly known thing, being mevatel b'shishim, having something nullified 1 in 60. The truth is, that is discussed in halacha and in Jewish law as the accepted practice nowadays of how something is declared nullified. But the original look of it is that there is actually another way of telling whether something is nullified or not, and that is by taste. Learning the halachas, the laws of taruvos, basar b'chal, of mixtures, kosher mixtures. There's the Rambam, Maimonides, and others. Rabbeinu Yerucham, I think, and they are strongly of the opinion, how do you see if something is nullified? You get a non-Jewish chef, someone who's a professional, has a professional taste palate, and they taste. And if they taste any remnants of the milk, let's say, then it's not kosher. If they cannot taste anything, then it's as if it is gone. As if not gone, as if it's been nullified within. So with that being said, we can better appreciate what is this problem of Hillel. The problem of Hillel is as follows. You have matzah. Let's look at it from a taste perspective and from a mitzvah perspective. Taste perspective, mitzvah perspective. From a taste perspective, it is understood. Now it's understood. Comes matzah and comes maror. Matzah is very bland. It's tasteless. It has a taste, but it's almost tasteless. In fact, you're not even allowed to add salt in the preparation of creating matzah. Why? Because it is lechem oini, poor man's bread. Halachma anya, hey lachma anya, this is the poor man's bread, we declare when we hold up the matzah at the Seder table. So we want to eat the matzah in a way of understanding that it's a bread of affliction, in the simple, most poorest way possible. So matzah is nothing more than flour and water, no other ingredients. So it's bland, almost tasteless. Definitely not the tastiest thing. You wouldn't come in the middle of Hanukkah and say, you know what's the most succulent, the most tastiest dish I've ever had? Matzah. Whew, that's good. No one is really looking forward to matzah. Let's face it. Matzah is tasteless. In fact, we go through great lengths of refraining from eating matzah as Pesach draws near. in order to try to eat matzah with gusto, with an appetite. Because otherwise we would not be having an appetite for matzah. That's the reality. Maror, what's maror? Bitter herbs. Oh boy, does it have a taste. It's strong, it's sharp. What is the problem? Comes matzah, almost tasteless, bland. Comes maror, sharp, strong taste. So you have a problem. What's the problem? When you eat the matzah and the maror combined, kamavatel, ka'asi hamaro mavatel matzah. What's the word? Asi mardrabano mavatel mitzvah deraisa. You're going to come along, you're going to try to eat the maror and the matzah together. The taste of the maror is going to outweigh and is going to destroy that of the matzah. You know, it's like moving onto chametz right now. It's like eating a burger. You know, some people are very, very strong advocates that you never put raw onions into a burger because of the sharpness of the onion. It's too harsh. Some people say you need to have. This is a little culinary chef's advice. Some chefs claim that the ultimate burger is to have sautéed onions. You saute them first before putting them into the burger. Otherwise, the taste of the onion is too harsh. I'm only bringing that, first of all, because I'm a professional barbecue chef. Just kidding. But this is to bringing out a point here. Eating something that's harsh and sharp, and especially when it comes to maror, that is the whole point. That's supposed to be sharp. The taste is going to outweigh that of the matzah. And we don't want that, because what's the emphasis here? The emphasis is the matzah, right? After all, that is the mitzvah. That's the mitzvah of the night. That and telling the story of going out of Mitzrayim. Those are the two mitzvahs of the Seder night. And you're going to eat the maror, and the only thing that's going to come into your mind after eating the kairach, how was that sandwich? You had matzah? I don't know, I'm not sure. The maror. Ooh, the maror. Now that was something. Well, you didn't have matzah? I had, basically. I don't know if I tasted it very well. I had such a strong maror. That's the problem, says Hillel. The problem is the taste of the maror is now going to outweigh the taste of the matzah, to the point that the matzah, not that ceases to exist, that the matzah now becomes secondary and gets swallowed up in the maror eating experience. And that's a problem. That's one way of understanding this problem, this query of Hillel. Another way of understanding this query of Hillel, according to the Rashbam, according to the Ran, etc., is that it's nothing to do with the taste. Who cares about the taste? A person has a blocked nose. What's the difference? He tastes this or tastes that. The problem is in the mitzvah itself. That when this, especially Rabbeinu Nissim, the Ran, explains this as follows, that when you mix two mitzvahs together, especially when you have a mitzvah d'oraisa and a mitzvah d'rabbanan, you have a biblical and rabbinical mitzvah that's mixed together. The problem now is the mitzvah that is biblical now starts to lose value in and of itself, because you are not demoting, you are devaluing it by mixing it together with other things. There is an importance of performing a mitzvah in and of itself without mixing it together with other things. That's the Havamina, not the Havamina. That is the approach of the Talmud in its query. That seemingly you should have the mitzvah of matzah by itself and not try to mix it with anything.